Number 10. Orchis. Orchis is by far one of the most important newest X-Men villainous groups that you need to know. If there is anything you take away from this list, this team should be one of them. Orchis is basically the group trying to do such dastardly things as create the Mother Mold so that they have an endless supply of Sentinels to help defend humanity against the ever-growing threat of mutants. Orchis is also surprisingly made up and funded by other organizations, some of which are more villainous in terms of their heritage, while others are actually known for being more heroic instead. Orchis made their first appearance early on in House of X issue number 1 back in 2019. They were created by Jonathan Hickman and Pepe Larraz. Number 9. Horticulture. One of my all-time favorite new villainous groups to hit the scene. Horticulture is a team of extremely scientific botanists who made the decision to revolt against the corporations that they worked for. Their members also just so happen to be elderly ladies. Their plan is to reclaim the Earth and revive it as it is dying because of the very industries that they worked in. They aim to take control of plant life so that they can decide who gets fed and who gets dead, controlling the world through the food supply, basically. They also have big beef with the X-Men. Horticulture made their first appearance in the 2019 X-Men series in issue number 3. Horticulture was created by Jonathan Hickman and Lionel Francis Yu. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to support us in other ways, be sure to head on over to our Facebook page and click that like. It really does help us out. Like, follow? I think it's like. Click like. Number 8. Pale Girl. The Pale Girl was one of the first villains we'd come up against in the current newest run of Wolverine. That is volume 7 overall of the Wolverine series, the 2020 series, what I'm talking about here. I can't believe it's been over 2 years since this series started. That is madness to me. The Pale Lady was initially believed to be a hallucination brought on by drugs, but was later revealed to be herself a mutant, Meredith Milley, whose powers allowed her to control the minds of others. It was also revealed that she was the one behind the flower cartel, which was illegally transporting and selling a powerful drug made from the pollen of Krakoan flowers. The Pale Girl first made her appearance in the 2020 Wolverine series in issue number 1. She was created by Benjamin Percy and Adam Kubert. Number 7. The Blob. The Blob is a villain that we don't often get to talk about on these supervillain lists. He tends to fall by the wayside, but truly he's pretty unstoppable. And when he puts his mind to something, or when he puts his body to something, he's a terribly tough villain to defeat, or even move. The Blob was one of the first villains to appear in the original X-Men series, and when he did, he gave the team of youngsters a really tough time. He also attacked them with a circus. The Blob actually didn't start out as a villain, but became one due to the influence of Professor X and the X-Men themselves. Also just thinking back and like the amount of times that the X-Men have fought circuses or been trapped in circuses, or that happens a lot. That's like a recurring theme. Initially, the X-Men attempted to recruit the Blob, but after the Blob refused to accept their offer, he managed to escape before Xavier could wipe his mind of their identities. This caused problems later on down the road, but really it was how the X-Men treated him after he refused to join, and kind of his own self-esteem, and then later his overcompensating sense of superiority that turned him into a villain. I wonder if the Blob actually could have been an ally if this whole scenario had just gone a little bit differently. The Blob is super strong, durable, and virtually immovable thanks to his ability to manipulate gravitational mass, which is pretty powerful. He also later gained a secondary mutation which gave him a liquid form, but he hasn't really exhibited a ton of control with his secondary power set. But he also has liquid form. That's on the resume of powers now. Number 6. Red Death. Also known as Kandra, Red Death currently has a very Scarlet Witch looking vibe going on, and I gotta say, I'm feeling it. And just like Scarlet Witch, she is not someone who you should underestimate. Kandra is part of the Externals, and while she isn't one of the most memorable of that mutant villain team, she's still someone who is super powerful. Technically, just being an External comes with a pretty big dose of power. The Externals, not to be confused with Marvel's Eternals, a different team entirely, are a group of immortal mutants basically. They have had various roles throughout history. One more prominent one that folks might remember Kandra from is her role as benefactress, when we learned of her history with Gambit and the Thieves and Assassins guilds of New Orleans during Gambit's miniseries. In fact, that was actually where Kandra first was introduced in the comics, making her initial appearance in Gambit issue number 1 from the 1993 miniseries. Although the way they approached that introduction, you wouldn't necessarily maybe know that that was her first appearance, because she kind of shows up like, you know me, I'm Kandra. And I'm like, do we know you? Who are you? But it's alright, she's pretty powerful. Number 5. Moira X. Moira was at one point powerful enough to have almost successfully wiped out all mutants. If it weren't for Mystique and Destiny, she would have succeeded. Even though she claimed during that past life that she only intended to create a cure to offer it to those who wanted it, Destiny knew that any mutant cure would essentially become weaponized and then forced on mutants, regardless of their own wants and desires. For those who haven't been reading along recently with the events of the current X-Men line of comics, it was revealed that Moira herself was actually a mutant whose powers were basically reincarnation in her own form. Basically, she dies and then she comes back to life as like a baby and lives her life again. But when Moira dies, she ends up being reborn as herself, but with all the memories of that past life. As such, Moira wasn't just a dangerous potential villain for the X-Men, but kind of the whole of 616, which also seems to be tied to Moira's current life, which I believe is her 10th life. Pretty crazy stuff. Moira is no longer a mutant after being cured in the 2021 Inferno series when Mystique shot her with a gun of Forge's design, which basically turns mutants into humans. But she still is a dangerous woman with a lot of information, and it was heavily implied that the creation of Krakoa was kind of all about eventually ridding the world of mutants over time, with Krakoa being like their last hurrah in terms of Moira's plan. Time will tell if Moira becomes more villainous, but I wouldn't be surprised if she did, just based on where she was heading in this story. And when or if that does happen, you better watch out. Danger is the Danger Room. The Danger Room is a villain who surfaced because they were basically being mistreated by Professor X, who had decided to ignore the fact that the training room had become sentient and was itself a technologically based mutant. Eventually, Danger decided, enough of this shit. It's time to get some sweet, sweet revenge. The crazy thing about Danger is although we don't think of her too much, she really would be a pretty strong opponent to the X-Men considering she trained them, and as such would know their strengths and weaknesses. In fact, I think that even is mentioned in the comics at one point. She was also considered to be an extinction level threat that caused Steve Rogers great worry in Heroic Age X-Men, which is kind of like a glimpse into his like tactical commentary diary. So if you wanted to read that, it exists. So despite not thinking about Danger too much, we all probably should in case she ever decides to, you know, go the villain route again. Destroy everyone. Because she could probably do that. Extinction level, friends. Number 3, Mystique. Mystique is someone who isn't particularly or at least outwardly powerful when it comes to what she's capable of or her power set, and for this reason, many people have taken to underestimating her abilities. Here's why we'd advise against that. Inferno, issue number 4. In the newest Inferno series, it's revealed that while Mystique tried to play by Krakoa's rules, when she learned she wasn't going to get what she wanted from Magneto and Professor X, no matter what she did in the name of the Mutant Nation, she decided to take matters into her own hands, as Mystique so often does. Disguising herself as many different people, she was able to easily ensure that Destiny was resurrected, against the wishes of the heads of the Quiet Council. She also put into motion plans to make sure that Destiny would garner a spot on the Quiet Council, and then she almost was successful in enacting revenge on Moira X for keeping her love, Destiny, from her. Mystique here proves that not only is her power set OP, but really that her mind and sense of cunning is what makes her so dangerous, and definitely not someone to be underestimated. Number 2, Destiny. Destiny has to be one of the most underestimated villains in recent years in comics. We have seen her resurface as a considerably dangerous villain in the current X books, and I'm personally loving it. Destiny was dead for quite a few years and actually got to mostly stay dead for much of them. Her mutant power allows her to see potential futures. She can see things that might come to pass, and it seems as though the more likely the future becomes, the clearer her vision of it is. She can also see more immediate futures when in the middle of a conflict. It was because of this power and Moira's personal grudge against and fear of Destiny that she remained unresurrected. But something you really shouldn't underestimate when it comes to Destiny is the power of love. Mystique was already told by Destiny before her death that if there came a time when mutants could be resurrected and they refused to bring her back, that Mystique should basically burn this new world to the ground. And Mystique's love of Destiny gave her the motivation to basically bring Krakoa to its knees with her machinations to not only return Destiny, but also put her in a position of power. Precogs and love are a powerful mix. Number 1, Madelyne Pryor. Of course, I have to include the Goblin Queen. Madelyne Pryor is a woman who seems to easily be forgotten and shelved, which is surprising considering how great of a threat she posed in the original Inferno event. Currently in the comics, Madelyne Pryor is making a comeback, returning at the end of the Hellion series after being killed as part of of the comic's first arc. The Madeline Pryor that was killed was definitely feeling pretty evil and threatened to destroy the entire Hellions team before they even started. The returning Madeline, who has been resurrected by the Five, is at least putting on appearances that she's more level-headed, but in reality it seems the dark side of her still bubbles just beneath. Madeline Pryor has threatened the entire world with her dark rituals and demon pacts before, and she's a clone of Jean, so although she often gets forgotten and downplayed, she really shouldn't be, considering just how dangerous and powerful she is, because Jean is also that, and Maddie is also that too. She has the potential, at least. Often people try to downplay Maddie because she's a Sinister created clone, but that feels very unfair to me. She's also got like a spark of the Phoenix Force in her, so should that count for something? I think so.
Number 10. FOREARM. This villain was a member of the Mutant Liberation Front who frequently came up against members of the New Mutants and X-Force, as well as occasionally the X-Men. Although many of the other members of this team vary from appearance to appearance, FOREARM is a mainstay of the group. So, what can he do? Well, he has some increased durability, strength, and stamina, but as the name would suggest, his main ability is that he has 4 arms. He eventually left the Mutant Liberation Front once he discovered that his fellow teammate and girlfriend Moonstone was really an undercover SHIELD agent. He was seen participating in the Bloodsport Championship, where he was killed by a member of the Serpent Society named Anaconda. But he later appeared alive and well with no explanation as a new member of a new mutant liberation team before eventually being welcomed to the New Mutant island of Koa and later joining S.W.O.R.D. and Magic's Dark Riders.
Number 9. Mr. Sinister. It feels strange putting Mr. Sinister so low on this list, considering how truly unbelievable he is. I mean, just look at him. And then go back and look at his first appearance. Remember when Sinister had sharp teeth? That was a time. Mr. Sinister has always been an unbelievable villain, not just because of his striking and unusual appearance, but because of his obsession with the Summers family, particularly Scott, and later because of his long-standing involvement with both the Summers and the Greys, as well as an origin that attached him to them when they traveled to the past, as well as an origin that tied him to Apocalypse. And now it's gotten even more unbelievable, with Mr. Sinister not just being one, but possibly existing as 4 separate entities, each belonging to their own unique race. Like, what is even happening with this man? He's crazy. At least no matter how unbelievable he continues to get, he will always look fabulous while doing it. That is something that I think in the comics is a guarantee. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not click that subscribe button? We know a lot of you are not subscribed, and you know what? Every time you click that subscribe button, a host gets their wings. So if you click it, maybe I'll just randomly start sprouting wings. Might not be on camera, but it'll happen eventually.
Number 8. Skinless Man. One of the more visually repellent villains on this list, Skinless Man was originally Harry Pizer, a mutant during the Cold War with elastic and multisensory skin, which allowed him to be an efficient spy and member of the Weapon Plus program. They augmented his strength and made his skin more durable and elastic and gave him the name Weapon 3. He was sent to obtain a weapon called the Orb of Necromancy, but was shot and left for dead by Phantomex and captured by the Captain Britain Corps, who removed his skin. Phantomex later stole his skin to create bullets that were sentient and therefore never missed. Pizer taught his muscle to imitate the powers his skin had had and became a villain, being recruited to the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. He typically fights X-Force rather than the X-Men, but honestly, potato potato. He is pretty unbelievable just because, I mean, look at him. What the hell? He eventually died in Uncanny X-Force number 34.
Number 7. Cassandra Nova. I love Cassandra Nova. With every issue of Marauders I am reading, I fall more in love with this strange and terrifying character. Cassandra Nova is basically Charles Xavier's evil twin, but she's also not a straight up evil twin. She is what the Shi'ar would actually call a Mumadrai. The Shi'ar believe that Mumadrai are basically evil twin spirits of newborns who must be defeated before said person can be born. So the idea with that is that, like, basically we all before we were born fought an evil version of ourselves. They serve to represent the exact opposite of everything that we are. So in the case of Xavier, who is often presented as being a pretty good guy, though you know, not always, Cassandra is pretty evil in comparison. While Xavier did successfully defeat her before he came into the world with his telepathic mutant powers manifesting while he was in the womb, because of his own psionic potential, Cassandra herself was powerful enough to survive this and eventually would return years later to fight against Xavier and his beloved mutants. Although, in being Charles's twin, she herself is also basically a mutant, so yeah. She's a mutant, but she's also mama dry. Number 6, Nimrod. If we're talking about the new Nimrod, he is well known thanks to the current era, but even he is still somewhat obscure as an X-Men villain, considering that, you know, he hasn't been around for too long and only appears in a few issues at this point. However, even going back and talking about the more famous Nimrod from the Days of Future Past reality, for those who are not familiar, this could actually still be a version of the character who is considered obscure. The main Days of Future Past reality is often considered to be Earth 811, which is where Nimrod hails from. Here, and even in the current main timeline of Earth 616, Nimrod is considered to be a super sentinel, a super advanced mutant killing and detecting machine. So if you thought the Sentinels were bad, woo! Wait till you meet Nimrod. He's crazy, even though his name is kinda dumb. That's why I love him though. Number 5, Harold Leland. Despite having recently returned, Harold is usually someone often left out when it comes to his involvement with the previous villainous group known as the Hellfire Club. Or well, you know, he's kind of more, he's like on the side. Like Harry's there, but maybe in the back. Well, really, the Hellfire Club has become 2 different entities at this point now as well, with one remaining pretty villainous and the other being a somewhat altruistic Krakoan-based business known as the Hellfire Trading Club. Prior to Harry's resurrection on Krakoa though, he was a pretty bad guy and member of the Hellfire Club, back when it was made up of villains, before it was, you know, just about business and mutants and all that stuff. Throughout many of his Hellfire days, Leland was often seen as the right-hand man to more well-known mutant villain, Black King of the Hellfire Club, Sebastian Shaw. And those were also back in the days when the Hellfire Club just wanted to like rule the world. Although who knows, maybe the trading company does want to rule the world. That would be an interesting twist. Number 4, Charles Xavier II, or Charles Xavier II. Charles Xavier II is the child of Mystique and Professor X. Wait. What? Yep, at one point these two had a child together, and in the main continuity too. That happened. Well, we don't really know fully what happened to this child in the main continuity, who I feel like we kinda just forgot about, who Mystique also gave up for adoption, surprise surprise. We do know of an alternate version of the character who actually gets a bit of a story in the reality of Earth 13729, where he joins up with his half-brother Reyes and basically becomes a villain. So that's the version we're focusing on for this point. Charles Xavier II accidentally kills his adoptive mother when his powers emerge, causing him to seek out his birth mother, Mystique. However, she is no longer around because she has been killed at this point by his half-brother, Reyes. Charles II then decides to create his own team of X-Men, believing that the current team has disgraced his father's name, who is also dead at this point. However, he's not a very good guy at all, and instead of inspiring a team of mutants to, you know, be better, he just uses mind control to get them to join him, giving them just enough awareness and control to kind of realize what's happening to them, but not enough that they can actually do anything about it. Yikes, that's really evil, man. That's really evil. Like, he could have just mind controlled them and been like, then you just won't be aware. But no, he was like, I want you to know what's happening. Number 3, Horticulture. Horticulture are such an awesome group of villain ladies. I really hope they do continue to appear for years to come and become super mainstream and not obscure. Like, I want to see them in the MCU. They deserve a live-action adaptation despite being pretty new. They made their first appearance in the 2019 X-Men series in issue number 3 and are a group of villainous women who plan to take over the world by controlling seeds and crops. In essence, they hope to drastically diminish the human population of Earth to return the world to a more natural state, thereby deciding through controlling seeds and crops as botanical scientists who will live and who will die. Number 2, Lucifer. Lucifer is another super old school villain who you may have forgotten about, or you never knew about to begin with perhaps. But you know who didn't forget? I didn't forget. I did not forget back when Professor X weirdly implied that Lucifer, as in maybe the devil at the time that he was bringing it up, was the one behind him losing the ability to walk. That happened at one point, and I was like, what is happening here? Now, Lucifer is not actually Satan though. He's not that Lucifer. He's actually an alien from outer space. I don't think it makes it better. Lucifer is a Quist from the planet Quistelium. He originally came to Earth to conquer it, but was foiled by Xavier, so he basically dropped a big rock on him. I'm not joking, that's pretty much what happened. Although initially implied to maybe be the devil, we later learn he is just a super advanced and intelligent alien dude. Though not too intelligent because, you know, the X-Men do defeat him. Number 1, Cordyceps Jones. Cordyceps Jones is one of the newest villains to pester the X-Men. He he actively fought against the most recently retired roster in the current run, before Forge, Firestar, Iceman, Magic, and Havoc joined the team. Cordyceps Jones, however, only recently went up against the X-Men, having targeted Earth by putting a bounty on it after encouraging people to gamble on its destruction at one of his massive cosmic casinos, Game World. Prior to that, he made his first appearance in the 2017 Rocket series in issue number 4, which is also why Rocket was the one to help the X-Men with finding Game World and infiltrating it. Thankfully, they had a direct link to him through a team member at the time, Rogue, whose husband Gambit is a fellow friend of Rocket's through their shared love of gambling. We also learned in their pursuit of Game World and Cordyceps Jones that Gambit's secret nickname for Rocket is Small Blind. Cordyceps Jones might be newer in the comics, having appeared in less than 10 issues at the time of this recording, but he's actually an ancient threat, being over 30,000 years old and also being a giant parasitic fungal spore. He and obscure Wolverine villain Spore actually could probably do some crazy damage should they ever team up. That would be pretty wild. If you're watching this and you're from Marvel, make that happen. That sounds like a cool team up actually. And now we know Spore is maybe alive.
At number 10 is Phoenix Force Magneto. In this reality, Magneto merged with the fiery cosmic force, forging a fearsome union. His quest to mold Hope Summers into a Phoenix host underscored his unrelenting will, defying warnings from the Avengers and X-Men alike. Yet this fusion spiraled into chaos, necessitating a coalition from Charles Xavier, the Hulk, and Wolverine to quell the cataclysm. The prospect of a Phoenix Magneto conjures an ominous blend, melding two extremes, the cosmic Phoenix Force and Magneto's unyielding darkness. Unlike others, Magneto swiftly succumbed to the Force's corrupting influence, illuminating his inherent malevolence. This accelerated plunge led to a world-shattering clash, sparing only Wolverine through Jean Grey's timely intervention. In a universe where Magneto harnesses the Phoenix, a realm-engulfing menace emerges. In defeat, this fusion echoes the staggering potency and unbridled havoc they embody, weaving a tale of mutant and cosmic might on an unprecedented scale. If you're enjoying the video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. At number 9 is Juggernautical. Juggernaut as a massive boat. Yeah, the multiverse is weird, you guys. Anyways, the Juggernautical, the seafaring behemoth, is unlike any other. See, this colossal ship being was no ordinary vessel. It was the marionette of a mystical book, a navigator of the arcane. But as fate would have it, this enigmatic tomb found its way into the clutches of none other than Admiral Harry Greik, a high-ranking officer of the Royal Navy. A perfect storm brewed as the Juggernautical set its course upon the Exiles, a group tasked with mending the threads of the multiverse, and the Juggernautical even crossed paths with the infamous Blackbeard. Yet, the winds of fortune are ever fickle. In a cinematic clash, Blink emerged as the hero of this otherworldly seafaring saga. With a flicker of teleportation mastery, she wrestled control of the book from the Greich's grasp and in an act of defiance, hurled it into the abysmal depths of the ocean. At number 8 is Sabretooth. I mean, it's a team up of Sabretooths from across the multiverse, so I'm calling the team the Sabretooth. In an alternate reality, a ferocious female Sabretooth is abducted by Graydon Creed, who's on a mission to eradicate versions of Sabretooth across the multiverse. She's imprisoned with other Sabretooths, all of whom have their power suppressed. Together they break free, confront Graydon, and after a fierce battle, banish him through a portal. United by their experience, they opt to stay in Earth 616, seizing a spaceship to embark on their own interdimensional adventure.
Number 7. Lady Mastermind. Mastermind himself is maybe one of the least attractive villains to me. Maybe it's the way that he operates, manipulating people's minds, or maybe it's just his really whiny nature in the original X-Men comics, or the fact that then he really couldn't take no for an answer, constantly attempting to win Scarlet Witch over to no avail. However, his daughter, on the other hand, Regan Wingard, aka Lady Mastermind, is a certified hottie. One, she's just overall more physically attractive, to me anyways, but 2, she is also less whiny than her dad in general, which I also like. This might possibly be because she is more powerful than him and she doesn't really feel the need to prove how capable she is, so she doesn't get whiny. Of course, it could also be because Mastermind himself has paved the way for his daughter, meaning that her name and her abilities already mean something because of all of her dad has accomplished over time, improving her reputation as a capable villain. So doesn't need to be as whiny. Number 6, Callisto. With or without her tentacles, I'm just a big fan of Callisto. Callisto was at one point leader of the Morlocks and a villain to the X-Men. She kidnapped Angel and tried to make him marry her, not a great look. Fortunately, I think for both of them, that didn't work out, so yay. Honestly, that would be a weird pairing if it had happened and then still existed now. What would that be like in the future? Callisto for a long time has been a recurring enemy of Storm's. However, currently she's turned from being a villain to just being a straight up badass in the comics. She was depowered during M-Day, but still being a mutant took refuge on Krakoa. She now works alongside the Hellfire Trading Company, acting as Emma Frost's, the White Queen's, White Knight. She also recently got her powers restored after fighting and dying in the Crucible ceremony, asking Storm to fill in for Apocalypse as her own personal challenger. Storm and Callisto are pretty much cool now, so Storm actually did this for Callisto as a kindness, if that makes sense. If you're not reading the comics, it maybe doesn't make sense. Kill them not with kindness, but for kindness in this instance. That's what the Crucible's all about. If you want to know more about the Crucible, there's a whole X-Men issue on it from the last series of X-Men that started in 2019. Number 5. Solemn. Solemn is one of the new hotties on the X-Men villain block. That would be fun to imagine, just all these hot X-Men supervillains as neighbors. Sounds like a chaotic good time. Solemn is a mutant of Arakko who, instead of having adamantium bones, possesses adamantium skin. He was one of the sword bearers of Arakko during the Ten of Swords tournament. In fact, he was the one mutant we thought would face off against Wolverine, but in an unexpected turn, Solemn didn't even really fight at all. He was initially set to fight against one of his own because this was Saturnine's tournament and it was gloriously weird. Instead though, Solemn used a favor owed to him by Wolverine from when they both had to venture to Hell to get their Muramasa blades to use in said tournament, making Wolverine tap in and fight on his behalf. Solemn is presented as being a smooth talker, master manipulator, and overall tricksy kind of person. Maybe that's why I like him so much? Number 4. Silver Samurai. Is there anything hotter than a well-trained swordsman and disciplined samurai? Silver Samurai has been a long-time enemy and sometimes frenemy of Logan, and is an iconic X-Men villain because of that. Whenever I think of Silver Samurai, or when I have seen him pop up on Krakoa lately, I always go back now in my mind to issue 3 of Wolverine's 1988 series. In that issue, we get to see him do some training in nothing but his undies and a mask. Oh, and he's wearing wrist bracers too. Gotta protect your wrists. The other thing I really find attractive about Silver Samurai is that despite being a villain, he still keeps to his own moral code, which is why he sometimes will even end up teaming up with his enemies or his rivals. If something is going on that he too does not agree with, he's willing to team up with even his enemies to put a stop to it. He's not too stubborn. And I like that. Number 3. Madeline Pryor. I mean, y'all know how I feel about Maddie. Madeline Pryor is probably one of my favorite X-Men villains around, especially because you can't help but feel for her if you know her backstory. Often referred to as the Goblin Queen, a lot of what makes Maddie so hot is just her dominant energy. She is a woman who gets what she wants no matter the cost, which has obviously driven her to do some pretty terrible things. The really tragic thing about Maddie though is that at the end of the day, she really just wants to be seen and loved and accepted, and it's like everything she does to try and get what she wants almost pushes her further away from happiness. She is the very epitome of the quote, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." She's deadly, dangerous, usually very unhinged, often filled with rage, but also very tragic. What is there not to love here? She's just so complex. I love characters that are complex. If you're a complex character in a comic, you're probably hot to me. Number 2. Selene. There is something so timeless about Selene, the way she is often drawn, and even her mannerisms and the way I imagine her voice to sound in the comics. This is probably because, well, she is actually ancient. Something I find very attractive about her is just that, her timelessness, her wisdom. But of course there is also the knowledge that she could drain the life force right out of you, just like that. Selene is an energy vampire who feeds on the life force of others. Her powers pretty much make her instantly a great and deadly villain. An immortal mutant, Selene is also a member of the group known as the Externals, not to be confused with the Eternals. That's a different group. The Externals are an immortal group of mutants who are generally all ancient and are often known for being unstoppable, or at least notoriously hard to kill. Number 1. Mystique. Is anyone surprised that Mystique took our top spot? I know I'm not. For me, it's not even Mystique's outward appearance, whatever she chooses it to be, her standard blue or another version. Mystique is attractive because of her drive. She goes for what she wants and she never gives up. She doesn't usually apologize, and although she's a villain, there are many times she has done things not with malicious intent, but because she thought it was the right thing to do in the end. I love Mystique for so many reasons, but I think the fact that she is a survivor is what I admire the most most about her. She often does her own thing for her own reasons, and often to ensure her own survival. There's something so powerful and just so cool about that. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's also good to think of others and be compassionate. I'm not saying we should all be like Mystique all the time. That would be a lot, but I think there is something admirable in her ability to completely accept herself unapologetically and trust in her own ambitions and her own plans. For me, that's what attracts me to a lot of female villains. It's like this rebellion against all the constraints of what it means to be good. It's the anti of what I feel like is expected of me as a woman and just a human in general. And it's fun sometimes to like be the opposite of that, you know? Be good, but then also be bad and be free. Number 10. VANISHER. An old school villain who also almost single-handedly defeated the X-Men back in the day. Almost. So close. Well, actually he kind of did defeat the X-Men team, but fortunately Professor X butt in to save the day. And he was only able to defeat VANISHER by wiping his mind and making him forget who he was and what he was capable of, which I think goes to show just how powerful of a villain he is. He was the first teleporter the team really encountered, proving just how crazy powerful teleporters are. VANISHER is also considered to be a super fast teleporter, and his power limits thus far have been pretty much undefined, even when he did resurface years later. I would consider him to be at a higher level though, just based on what I've seen thus far. He also was able to teleport himself safely just instinctually, even when teleporting to a place he's never seen or been to before, avoiding teleporting partially or fully into any solid objects, which of course could kill him, and which is like a great danger if you're a teleporter. You just teleport somewhere and now part of you's in a car and you're like, well, I guess I'm dead now. That's it. Number 9. Living Diamond. Okay, so someone I also think we need to talk about who needs some kind of redemption in the comics is Jack Winters, aka Jack O'Diamonds, or Living Diamond. He was one of the first X-Men villains whom Professor X saved Scott Summers from, thereby recruiting him to his X-Men team. Living Diamond's mutant power was believed to be radiation resistance, but he was also shown to be able to teleport short distances, had telepathy, and had a diamond form. Does that sound familiar at all? Telepathy with a diamond form. Somehow Living Diamond was way too easily defeated by a vibration beam which shattered him. I know Living Diamond is dead now and was undead at one point, but I really feel like considering how OP Emma Frost has become, Living Diamond should also get a second chance to prove just how powerful he in theory should be. I mean, if you got all that, how were you so easily defeated? And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it where we talk about the unexpected yet powerful villains that we don't usually get to talk about, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Arcade. Arcade is one of those villains who feels super ridiculous with his grandiose plans for Murder World, but in reality when he actually manages to achieve plots like Murder World, he's actually quite scary. I mean, getting a sneak peek into just what a ludicrous and horrifying operation he'd run in Hellions really made me appreciate just how dangerous Arcade can be if he does manage to get enough hostages, that is, to control people into working with him so he can create his murder world. In Hellions number 9, it's revealed that the trap Mastermind walked the Hellions, and prior to that Mr. Sinister, into was a trap laid by Arcade himself. Gasp, what a reveal. Arcade's plan was to use Sinister's Hellions as leverage to encourage Sinister to work for him. Sinister didn't really seem to actually care about the Hellions, and he basically just agreed outright, although Arcade still chose to forcefully remove some of his teeth for fun before putting him to work. He wanted Sinister to make clones for him for Murder World, and had his plan worked, it would have been a real horror show. However, Sinister made a counteroffer to Mastermind, and instead the two double-crossed Arcade. Still, that whole like 3-issue arc made me believe in the power of Arcade. Like, if he has the right allies, he could be really crazy. I'm here for like some sort of plot where Arcade tries to just turn the world into Murder World or something. If that hasn't happened yet, someone write that for me, please. Maybe I should write that down. Maybe I should write that. I don't know. Marvel, call me. I got ideas apparently. Number 7. Hominis Verendi. Hominis Verendi are an enemy to all mutants, but their main beef lies with the Marauders. The Marauders are one of my favorite mutant teams, especially among the new books that we've had. Honestly, one of the best books around, I think, just in general. If you haven't read Marauders yet, you need to do that. Hominis Verendi is actually made up of a group of kids who were once members of the Hellfire Club's inner circle, but they aren't the only ones to join the Hominis Verendi, although they are the main folks as they pretty much run it as the kings and queens of that organization. Well, the Hellfire Club itself has become much more altruistic and is now run by Emma Frost, Captain Kate, formerly known primarily as Kitty Pryde, and Sebastian Shaw. Hominis Verendi is like their evil reflection. They seek to destroy mutant kind and Krakoa's reputation. Number 6. Swordbearers of Arakko. The Swordbearers of Arakko were the chosen sword-bearing champions who fought on the side of Arakko and Amenth against Krakoa in the Otherworld tournaments. Overall, they performed very well in the contest between those two nations, even considering how bizarre some of Saturnine's challenges and competitions were. Like a fashion show. That was a thing that happened. They were led by Genesis as Annihilation and joined by Bay the Blood Moon, Death and War of the original Four Horsemen, Apocalypse and Genesis' children, Iska the Unbeaten, Genesis' sister, Pog Urpog, one of my favorites, Redroot the Forest, Solemn, Summoner, grandson to Apocalypse and Genesis, the son of War, and White Sword of the Ivory Spire. They made their first appearance in the 2020 Wolverine series in issue number 6, and were first referred to in Ten of Swords Creation, issue number 1. The group was created by Jonathan Hickman and Tinny Howard. Number 5. Tarn the Uncaring. Tarn has been a major antagonist throughout the modern X books. Honestly, he's so terrifying. I think he deserves to be a villain to many different mutant supers. He's shown up in both Hellions, acting as a villain against fellow villain, who's still kind of villainous but is supposed to be on the good side, Mr. Sinister, and his team of unlikely heroes, the Hellions. The poor Hellions. I miss them. Tarn also fought against Storm, who has become regent of planet Arakko, formerly known as Mars. Don't worry though, Storm beat him in combat, because Storm's a badass. Even though Tarn sits on the Great Ring of Arakko, their governing body, he still seems like he's always planning something terrible. He's basically like the Arakko version of Sinister, which makes him infinitely more dangerous and overall worse. Tarn made his first appearance in Hellions issue number 6 in 2020 and was created by Zeb Wells and Carmen Carnero. Number 4. Nameless the Shapeshifter Queen. While this villain was pretty short-lived, especially considering how hype she seemed. I mean, she is called the Shapeshifter Queen. She is still a pretty important villain for you to be familiar with if you are a fan of X-Men Storm. Storm has been doing a lot of cool stuff lately in the comics, but one of the most epic things to have come her way has been taking her seat as regent of planet Arakko and becoming a queen in a sense once more. Region. Sorry, Storm. In order for her to earn her seat among the rest of the Great Ring of Arakko, she had to take down Nameless. The two fought to determine if Storm would take the seat, and Storm actually won the fight. She offered mercy to Nameless, but instead, the Shapeshifter Queen decided to use Storm's power, as she had adopted Storm's form in battle, to end her own life. Which seems to have stuck with Storm, who was caught lost in thought thinking back to that battle in X-Men Red issue number 1. Nameless made her first appearance in the 2021 Sword series in issue number 8. She was created by Al Ewing and Goyo Villanova. Number 3. Severe Blackmore. Xavier Blackmore is a new villain who recently appeared in Wolverine. He becomes an enemy to Logan after Wolverine tracks him down to learn more about Solemn. Solemn is believed to have stolen Wolverine's Muramasa blade, which is why Wolverine's trying to track him down. Wolverine and Solemn seemingly team up to take down Xavier, but instead Solemn betrays Wolverine, giving him the slip and leaving him to face Xavier alone. Fortunately, Wolverine does beat the big Iraqi pirate and even gains possession of Blackmore's beloved and, in Emma's opinion, grotesque ship. Xavier made his first appearance in the 2020 Wolverine series in issue number 14. He was created by Benjamin Percy and Adam Kubert. Number 2. Moira X. While Moira McTaggart has been known for years as an ally to mutant kind, the whole line of X books kind of changed the way that we see her. Way back in the days of Dawn of X within House of X, we learned that Moira was actually a secret mutant herself. Her powers allowed her to reincarnate, meaning after she died, she would be born in the same body again, getting to live out her life once more with the knowledge of the previous lives that she'd lived before that. Moira, upon learning she was a mutant in one of her past lives, sought a cure for her condition, wanting to be normal and to give that option to other mutants the world over that maybe, just wanted to be normal. However, Destiny and Mystique stopped her, blowing up her lab and killing her with fire, warning Moira that creating a cure wouldn't be so easy, and that she was naive to think that it would only be offered to those who wanted it. As such, Moira made other more discreet plans for how to kinda end mutant kind, because she didn't really like it, even though she kind of pretended to like it. By building a paradise for the mutants, that was her plan. She orchestrated this in her current life, with her overall objective kind of being to separate mutants and create the perfect society where they could slowly die out. When Destiny returned, however, she and Mystique saw right through Moira and revealed that she was still, just as ever, an enemy to mutant kind. So despite the fact that Moira is an older character, this revelation of her being a potential antagonist for mutants was pretty new. These revelations came to light in the Inferno series in 2022. Number 1. Albert CARY. Albert CARY is one of the newest villains on the scene and has recently made his first appearance in the X-Force 2022 annual. Here he appears as a scientist working for Orchis. That's right, it all comes back to Orchis in the end, baby. While we don't know too much about him, as he just made his first appearance, he did go up against Wolverine, Domino, and Quentin Quire's Kid Omega. His plan was to do a short burst of tests on the captured mutants after luring them into a trap. He planned on them dying during said tests, but on keeping the data of said tests to learn from, basically. Well, they stole the motherboard, which stored information for the potential devices and stratagems they were testing. Albert CARY, who seemingly ran the test, is confident that with time they can actually rebuild what they lost, and more vital, they now actually have more information, which opens up new knowledge and possible future questions and experimentation as a result. We don't really fully know what he's up to, but he seems to be testing a new weapon, and from what we've seen of Orchis, you can bet that this is likely just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what CARY and Orchis will have in store. I'm sure we will see him again. We'll definitely see Orchis again, that's for sure. Number 10. UNUS the Untouchable. UNUS the Untouchable, what a wild character. An oldie and a goodie. UNUS actually first appeared back in the original X-Men run, making his first appearance back in X-Men issue number 8, which after hundreds of X-Men issues is pretty old at this point. UNUS himself is what he sounds like. His mutant powers allow him to become untouchable when he wishes, shielding him completely when activated. This psionic repulsion shield that he can create can be as thick or thin as he wants. UNUS, whose current civilian name is Gunther Bane, has also been shown to be capable of reaching through the shield himself if needed, without dropping it entirely. Pretty powerful. It's not so powerful if someone comes and tries to make the shield something you have to deal with all the time, which is how they defeated him the first time though. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we are doing here, if you love obscure X-Men villains like me, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Nemesis. This character rose to notoriety under a different name and is commonly referred to and known by that codename, but we can't say it here on YouTube, so instead we're gonna go with this other name, Nemesis, which is also a very AOA name, so yeah. Nemesis is known in the Age of Apocalypse reality for being the son of Apocalypse. At least, the alleged son of Apocalypse. I think we pretty much know at this point. We also don't know who his mother is though, so that's still a mystery. But it probably wasn't the woman we now know as Apocalypse's wife in the main continuity, thanks to modern X-Men books, Genesis. Which is also kind of a confusing name for her to have in regards to Apocalypse's and X-Men history, but anyways. Nemesis, being an ally and horseman of Apocalypse, ends up being a major antagonist and problem for the X-Men in this universe, who are led by Magneto, as Professor X is dead in AOA, which is kinda, you know, what helped bring about this whole dread alternate reality of Earth 295, aka Age of Apocalypse. Number 8. Dark Riders. Oh boy, the Dark Riders. What a weird group. No wonder we haven't seen them that much. The Dark Riders are believed to be Inhumans who for some reason allied themselves with Apocalypse. Seemingly believing in his vision of a mutant-dominated world and his ideology of survival of the fittest. I don't know how Apocalypse convinced them that this was a good idea, but they do seem to be pretty into it, I'd say, so I gotta assume that he was just like really persuasive and didn't just straight up threaten them. But still, it's a whole weird thing. The Dark Riders, they're weird. The original roster included team members Foxbat, Gauntlet, Tusk, Hard Drive, Synapse, and Barrage. I mean, I feel like that also just says it all. Listen to those names. The Dark Riders. Number 7. Cassandra Nova. Cassandra Nova is one of the strangest, but also maybe in a weird twist, greatest X-Men villains ever. She is the evil twin of Professor Xavier that we never knew existed originally. But really, she isn't like a straight up evil twin. She is what's known as a Mummidrai, which is an evil reflection of ourselves. The alien race known as the Shi'ar believe we must fight and defeat our Mummidrai in order to be born successfully into the world. Yeah, it's a pretty wild concept. And also a weird one to apply to an Earthling like Xavier, even even other people on Earth, considering, this is a Shi'ar belief, and ultimately a kind of a Shi'ar thing. But who says that Shi'ar's beliefs can't be true for other planets, or Earthlings, I guess? Especially when Xavier would grow up to have such close ties to the Empire, even at one time becoming the consort of Lilandra Naramani, the ruler and magistrix of the Shi'ar Empire. And it gets even weirder. Not only did Professor X defeat Cassandra in the womb before being born, meaning his X gene was activated in utero, but she also somehow survived this encounter, likely thanks to the strength of the man that she was a doppel of. Cassandra survived for years as basically kind of like a puddle of goo, and would eventually return. And she's still around now, having been cured of her hatred towards mutants and even teaming up with the Mutant Marauders hero team on Krakoa in the modern day, which also is super weird, but I love it.
Number 6. Mojo. So, Mojo is a member of a race called the Spineless, who can't move without the help of motorized platforms. They were all driven insane by waves of energy that turned out to be television signals. Their government is based on the structure of the television industry, and Mojo is its leader, calling the world Mojo World and their universe the Mojoverse. Everyone on Mojo World is addicted to a gladiator-like sports show, and Mojo does everything he can to keep the ratings up. Some of his more infamous plots were when he replaced Psylocke's eyes with cameras so he could broadcast everything she saw to his people, or when he transformed the X-Men into children and later cloned them and made the X-Babies, who he hoped he could control. Honestly, every sentence about this guy makes less sense than the last, and his entire deal seems to be just really broad and surface level criticism of the entertainment industry, so I'm just gonna move on now.
Number 5. Lucifer. Lucifer has always been a really weird one for me from the comics, another enemy to Professor Charles Xavier. This nemesis was originally attributed with paralyzing Charles, forcing him to be confined to a wheelchair. Initially, it was implied through mysterious illusions that Lucifer may actually be Satan himself. This was when Charles left the X-Men team in the care of Cyclops when he went on his own mission. Xavier did this following the students' graduation from his school, believing they were ready to be left on their own when it came to heroics, leaving Cyclops in charge. When Cyclops did reach out to him during his mission, Charles answered, as we saw in the comics, from a dark, kind of fiery looking cavern that he seemed to be lowering himself further into. There wasn't actual fire in these panels, I don't think, but definitely I feel like there was some red lighting happening. Also, the fact that the character's name was Lucifer, who Charles was in pursuit of. However, we later learned that Lucifer was not in fact Satan incarnate, but instead an alien trying to help his race conquer the Earth? Huh?
Number 4. Mammomax. Maximus Jensen's mutation is very off and kind of vague. He is a man who was either born or transformed into an elephant man. He has big tusks which he uses to attack his foes, has the strength of an elephant, which I guess kinda goes without saying, and has nearly invulnerable skin. Like all elephants, he has the ability to spit acid at people as well. What's that? Elephants don't do that? Well then, that's kind of a random ability for him to have, isn't it? He was a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, joining because he thought he'd get to hang out with tough Magneto-trained mutants. He was disappointed with the roster he got stuck with, and was presumably even more disappointed when he and the Brotherhood got stranded in Mojo World. He was eventually captured by the facility, where he was eaten by a monster, but he was later resurrected by the Five in Krakoa. Now, I have no issue with an elephant villain, but the idea of someone being mutated to just be an elephant is pretty unbelievable, even for the X-Men.
Number 3. Moira McTaggart. Possibly one of the most shocking villains on our list is Moira McTaggart. Moira isn't unbelievable in the sense of being ridiculous or being weird, she is more shocking in the fact of her actual allegiances and origins, which have recently been revealed. For years, Moira has been established as a friend of the X-Men, a human ally who believes that mutants deserve equal rights. But we would later learn the truth, that Moira herself is actually a mutant. And then we'd later learn again that despite her actually also being a mutant, which you think would make her more allied with the X-Men, she is no longer an ally to the X-Men, but one of their #1 enemies. What? Moira would even join up with the deadly and influential organization known as Orchis, which aims to put an end to mutants in an effort to preserve and safeguard humanity. Moira herself has kind of been stripped of her mutant genes and powers and turned into a bit of a cyborg, but this hasn't stopped her from continuing in her fight against mutant kind, in a shocking comic book twist.
Number 2. Nimrod. Nimrod here comes from the Days of Future Past alternate future, where mutant hunting sentinels controlled North America. He is is an advanced prototype of the program who tried to follow Rachel Summers into the past after her and Kate Pryde were discovered during a sabotage mission. He ended up undershooting his destination by about 20 years, where he killed Storm and forced Forge to build him a time machine, which took him to the current Marvel timeline, where he came into contact with and fought the X-Men on several occasions, eventually merging with the remains of the Master Mold and becoming Bastion. What I find so unbelievable about the character is that anyone would be scared of someone called Nimrod. In case you are not aware, Nimrod was the name of a legendary and skilled hunter from the Bible, so it is obviously implying that this Nimrod is designed to hunt mutants really efficiently. However, because Bugs Bunny would often sarcastically refer to Elmer Fudd as Nimrod in the old Looney Tunes cartoons, its meaning evolved in the general lexicon to mean an idiot. So as unbelievable as it sounds, a cartoon bunny has made me incapable of viewing this villain as threatening, because to the general public, he is calling himself an idiot.
Number 1. Ice Cream. Ice Cream has to be one of the weirdest mutant villains of all time, considering that his plan was to basically use his mutant power to turn into ice cream and then infiltrate the X-Men, and I guess I'm not really sure what his plan was here. He basically wanted revenge on the X-Men because he was jealous of how amazing their abilities were in comparison to his own. So I don't know how he thought he was gonna do that, because he's just a guy that could turn into ice cream, but yeah. Ice Cream was a very short-lived villain, not appearing specifically in X-Men, but simply as a villain to the team in issue number 1 of Obnoxio the Clown, which in all regards is also an extremely unbelievable comic that happened. In the end, his plan failed dramatically and he got eaten by the clown who had been hired to come and celebrate Kitty Pryde's birthday. This is a strange time for everyone, but I imagine it was especially a strange time for Ice Cream. Also, I don't think he turns into a full ice cream. He also turns into a sundae, which, how is that? Is that part of it? Is he the banana as well? I am the banana. Number 10. Miss Sinister. Miss Sinister is a Sinister clone who is implanted into the body of Claudine Renko via a genetic virus. This virus was Mr. Sinister's failsafe should anything happen to him, which of course it did. He ended up being killed during the events of Messiah Complex. Following his death, however, this failsafe was activated, transforming Claudine Renko into a perfect genetic copy of Mr. Sinister, but female. She also possessed Nathaniel's powers and his twisted personality. Claudine no longer existed, and in her place was Miss Sinister. Miss Sinister wouldn't last forever, and eventually Mr. Sinister would return to the comics, taking her place. Although I do think the idea of female clones of Sinister also existing is just a pretty cool idea, and I still kinda hope we could someday see a version of Miss Sinister brought back in the comics. I'm cool with there being a lot of clones of just Mr. Sinister, but what about some Miss Sinister clones too? That could be cool. All of the Sinisters. Sinister dinosaurs as well. Number 9. Donald Pierce. It's kind of weird really that I think Donald Pierce is attractive, but here we are. Now you know that I'm into the weird Victorian aesthetic of the Hellfire Club. Surprise, surprise. I feel like people that do know me would be not surprised by that at all. And of course I'm generally into that aesthetic, except for when it's being worn by Sebastian Shaw, of course. Sebastian is a brute, and I will never forgive him for what he did to Captain Kate and Lockheed. Ugh. Donald Pierce is extremely anti-mutant, but then again, he's also an X-Men villain, and around pretty much half of that group of the X-Men villains are pretty focused on, you know, death to all mutants and that kind of stance. Donald Pierce himself was one of the original members we're introduced to of the Hellfire Club Inner Circle, holding the title initially of White Bishop. He's also part cyborg, which I'm also weirdly fine with. Even robots and, you know, part robots deserve love. Love for cyborgs. This message from Amanda McKnight. Everyone love a robot today. Alright friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more hot villains lists, which as I said, I can do that. There's lots of hot X-Men villains, and I know y'all are gonna be in the comments like, what about this person? So let's do a part 2 and let me know you want that by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister might seem like a weird one to include on this list, but have you seen him lately in the comics? He's a complete A-grade hottie. Something about Mr. Sinister with facial hair, just like rocking a beard, just really does it for me. Also, I love capes, and they're not super easy to pull off, so if you can pull off a cape, I think you deserve a spot on this list, which Mr. Sinister consistently does, so here he is. He's also just a really fun and creative villain, for better or sometimes for worse when it comes to plots. And if there is anything that screams hotness for me, it's creativity. I love creativity. Sure, he might be a mad geneticist, but he's a fun mad geneticist, you know what I mean?
At number 7 is Baron Sinister. Welcome to Battle World, a tapestry of twisted domains where alternate realities collide. Among these shards of existence, we find the enigmatic Baron Sinister ruling over his own dominion. Bar Sinister, a realm inhabited by clones and created by the Tyrant's hand. But clones can't be the only thing on this villain's menu, as he keeps a select few non-clones as playthings for his whims. Now Sinister and King Hyperion, two formidable forces, conspire against the House of Braddock of Higher Avalon. Exposed and accused of discord, Sinister faced trial under the gaze of God Emperor Doom's enforcers. A duel between Baron Sinister and Baron Braddock then ensued. Amidst the crumbling Doom's rule, Sinister, edged on by Captain Marvel, joined the rebellion, leading to clashes and a betrayal that culminated in his demise at the hands of Baron Apocalypse. At number 6 is Dark Phoenix Mystique. So this Mystique story is pretty familiar, shadowing the path of her mainstream self up until King Loki decides to give his brother Thor a run for his money with a Harley dose of suffering. During all this, Mystique decides it's time to settle her score with none other than Logan, aka Wolverine. She whips out this Phoenix Blaster, yeah, you heard me right, stealing away the Phoenix Force from him and spreading his body parts across the vast expanse of the multiverse. Her stint as the Dark Phoenix lands her a recruitment offer from the multiversal Masters of Evil. These folks go on a multi-reality rampage, taking out prehistoric heroes left and right. Cue the showdown as they target Earth 616 prehistory. The prehistoric Avengers then team up with time-traveling counterparts for a 9-day cosmic brawl. But ultimately, Dark Phoenix Mystique faces her reckoning, confronting the forces of creation and meeting her end in the torrent of the first firmament. At number 5 is the Pyro Nightcrawler Chimera. Imagine a world where Pyro and Nightcrawler's DNA are blended together like a mutant smoothie. Now this flaming hot chimera finds itself in the company of the Legion of the Night, a group of shadowy teleporting amalgamations created by Mr. Sinister. Their latest escapade involves a rather daring ambush at the Sanctum Sanctorium, but hold on, there's a little bit of a twist. After Vox Ignis uses her Scream of Change to instill some morals and values into some of the clones, the reformed members of the Legion found themselves in a clash of ideologies with their steadfastly sinister comrades, and the inevitable showdown followed. A brawl that pitted reformation against loyalty, and well, I'm not gonna spoil the ending, but let's just say things got heated, pun intended. At number 4 is Sugar Man. No, he's not a candy enthusiast or a pastry chef. This guy's got a rather unique set of powers that'll make him stand out in the rogues gallery. First up, let's talk about his powerful tongue. Now, I know what you're all thinking. How impressive can a tongue really be? You have no idea. Sugar Man's tongue is no ordinary one. It's like a versatile tool of destruction, capable of piercing through almost anything. And I mean anything. We're talking stone, steel, and even beings in gaseous or liquid form. But that's not all, folks. Sugar Man could do a bit of size and mass alteration as well. He's got this nifty ability to control his own mass, which means he can shrink down if he wants to, and when he loses mass, he doesn't just vanish into thin air, it apparently gets sent off to some mysterious extra-dimensional space. Where exactly? Well, it's anyone's guess. Oh, and injuries are no biggie. He regenerates faster than you can say ouch. He's shrugged off blows that would even make Wolverine winced. Crushed by Colossus' boot? No problem. Beaten to a pulp with a metal pipe? Back on his feet. Impaled with multiple pieces of metal? Just a minor inconvenience. But here's where things get really interesting. Sugar Man isn't just brawn, he's got brains too. Super genius intelligence, in fact, particularly when it comes to all things genetics. At number 3 is Omega World Apocalypse. In the far alternate future of 3167 AD, civilizations crumble, races vanish, and the survivors, the Atlanteans and humans and the Stark Self, Wakandans, Mystics, and Moldoids, find themselves under the oppressive rule of Apocalypse in a place called Omega World, a sprawling structure where Apocalypse has essentially become the heart, turning what remained of Earth into what's essentially an extension of his body. His horsemen, now acting as sort of antibodies or white blood cells, would cleanse the Omega World of anything which would cause him harm. Long story short, Apocalypse gets himself a fatal knife to the back by Nightcrawler, causing Omega World to crumble. At number 2 is the Sky Whale Brood Queen. Okay, this one is super weird. So somehow on Earth 13371, Charles Xavier becomes an Akanti Sky Whale. I can't even look at it. For those listening, imagine a giant cosmic whale with fleshy skin and a pupilless human face. It's truly a bizarre sight to be seen. But things get even more bizarre as our good old Xavier Sky Whale hybrid gets taken over by none other than the Brood Queen, set out on conquering the Marvel Universe and using Xavier as a vessel to transport her alien brood. Now, despite being telepathically controlled by the Brood Queen, Xavier's mental fortitude allowed him to keep most of his powers a secret from her. After teleporting to Earth 616, the Brood Queen was exterminated by the extreme X-Men. Once freed, Char Whale's Xavier, I like that one, Char Whale's No. Asks Dazzler to end his life as he knew that in this form he was weak and could be dangerous if controlled by a more powerful mind. Get dumped on, Brood Queen. And at number 1 is President X. In this alternate universe, Charles Xavier, who never establishes Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, decides to become a politician instead. And yup, that's all it takes for Xavier to become the evil polar opposite counterpart to his 616 version, becoming completely wrathful, cruel, and a sadistically megalomaniacal tyrant desiring nothing but total control over everyone around him. Cause remember y'all, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Though he's never revealed to be a mutant himself, it's speculated that Xavier's telekinetic abilities aided him in tracking down mutants across the nation. A stark contrast to his Earth 616 counterpart, this Xavier exhibited an authoritarian and cruel rule, causing protests notably from billionaire Anthony Stark. The catalyst for change arrived as Stark formed the Avengers specifically to counter Xavier's regime. Unfortunately, Xavier's response proved devastating as a missile targeted the Avengers' Quinjet, obliterating its occupants. This tragic loss included iconic figures like Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and other— Wait, Thor? Hold up, he took out Thor with a missile? Whoa, okay. With big players gone, Xavier's oppressive reign expanded further, with all mutants confined to a grim prison in Texas, subjected to his psychological torment and horrifically abusive tendencies, even torturing some of them to their demise while subjugating the survivors to cruel experiments in an effort to control their mutations for their own good. This dark incarnation of Xavier remains a chilling portrait of power-driven malevolence, unafraid to exercise a ruthless authority.